I'm going to be reviewing Greek Lives by Plutarch. So this is a really interesting book. It does seem kind of like boring as like, oh, it's just a history book or it's written by this old guy. But really what it is a collection of, like 8 different people's lives, right? And so what he's done is he's taken like all the like history that was available. I'm not sure exactly when he wrote this, but he wrote this a long time ago. So as in like closer to when the Greeks were around and the Romans and that kind of time era. And he compiled a lot of historical documents and then just like kind of wrote summaries of it. But he didn't really focus on summarizing the historical events as much as he focused more on, what were these people's lives like? What mistakes did they make? What good things that did they have, right? He looks at a lot of people who are in positions of power and leadership, and then he analyzes what did they do right? What did they do wrong? What were some of their flaws? What were some like quirky things about them that either helped them or didn't help them? And so it's not necessarily focused on like, oh, here's a really, accurate account of what happened back in like ancient Roman or ancient Greek times. It's more of like, if you want to become a better leader, be more successful at certain things, and understand how human nature works, it's a great way to do that. And I think it's so funny that today we think that, we have computers, we have all this stuff. We're so much more advanced than the Greeks and Romans because they were so long ago. But you read these stories and you just realize that human nature is timeless. Like, we are making the same mistakes we were making a long time ago, and we'll continue making those same mistakes again and again and again. We all have certain flaws in our nature. We will continue to deny that we have flaws in our nature. And this will just happen for the rest of as long as humans are alive. And I think that the only way to really escape this loop is by realizing that, because that's the first step that you must take to actually grow. Is you have to realize that we're all making these same mistakes. We're all like, history is essentially repeating itself in different forms again and again. And the reason why it repeats itself is because humans act the same exact way. Right? Why were there multiple financial crashes over like the course of just, human history? It's because we always get caught up in the moment, and we a lot of times just think about things and don't really examine the facts, and that continues to happen. It will continue to happen again and again and again. So I'm going to go through some of my notes here. It's not really a summary, but I think just some of the biggest things I took away, and hopefully they're helpful. So the first person I really got a lot from was Lycurgus. The names are very hard to pronounce. But he was with the Spartans, and so their whole Laconian society was designed in preparation for war. So you just imagine like a country or like a small state where just everything about the society is preparing people for war. So he removed the concept of a wealthy person and ended crime by making the currency and like value system so hard to use, so inconvenient and worthless that it actually dissuaded people from stealing. Then he forced everyone to eat together and then used ostracization to keep birth rates high by ostracizing. So ostracizes, you kind of like single out, make fun of, seclude other people from the main part of society. And what they would do is ostracize single men and women who are not married and punish them through making them walk like naked in the snow. So I think there's a lot of different things about this. So the first thing about removing a concept of wealthy person, it removes a lot of envy. It doesn't remove all of it, but it removes a lot of envy, and also the fact that you can't really do anything about the envy. What do I mean? Well, if somebody's very wealthy, you can steal their wealth, you can kill them and take their wealth, right? But if they're very like intellectual and you envy them for that, it's hard for you to like oust them in that way. And the only way you can do that is by, becoming more intellectual yourself and like becoming a better speaker yourself. And as such, it also meant that like the requirements for living are lower, because if you think about it, if everybody has to eat together, then like, there's somebody providing food for everybody. And then therefore, like, you don't really need to have certain things. And if you're forced to eat together, then you can't be in your house as much. And if you're not in your house as much, you're not going to probably spend a lot on nice ornaments and gifts and decorations for your house. So now your house is more simple. And so everybody is just like kind of, they go from this level of really high abundance to just like equality, sort of, in a sense, right? But then they use this society and this structure to really educate the next generation of youth, the boys, and make sure they're at their peak performance for being, ruthless actors of war and also just really intelligent people. So it was like this whole community is surrounded in educating the next generation. So even like a lot of older people who can't work, right, or don't do anything, they just contribute by trying to teach the younger people something. And I thought this was really, really interesting. And I also think that it's interesting to use ostracization to keep birth rates high, because like in a very small society, right, it's usually normal. You will have high birth rates, and it just promotes a lot of marrying and, just continuing on the lineage. Because if you don't have that, then it's very easy for you to die out, or also, get infiltrated by maybe people of other cultures, and that can change kind of what your country or state is about. So now with the young boys, right, they're put in these camps and they're trained to enjoy and get used to extreme ruggedness. And like, just so you understand the extent of how rugged and kind of barbaric, I guess, these camps were, right? They got so used to it, right, that for them war, because like in war, there just was less rules because like, they weren't being looked after so much. And so they, in a sense, in war, they had more freedom than they did when they're back at home, these camps. So these, like the Plutarch says in the book, that like these were the times when these people were the only ones in the entire world who actually enjoyed war, because for war they actually had more freedom and were able to do more things than if they were just at home and in peace. So for a lot of other people, it's the exact opposite, right? Like in peacetime, they enjoy their lives. They have a lot of wealth. They're able to just like chill out, get lazy and just do whatever they want and stop working. But because, Lycurgus takes over and he just removes the concept of wealth, now there's like nothing to really enjoy. And especially if you're a young boy and everybody's talking about like war, and also in the state, right, the most glorious thing you can do is die for the country. And so that's been put on a pedestal, and now you want to achieve that and to go down fighting in glory. So now that like makes it seem like war is interesting, war is fun. You want to go to war, and you don't actually want to sit at home and be in peacetime. And I think this is really different from maybe a lot of modern societies today, where you're seeing a fraction of people not necessarily, be as patriotic or as tied to their country or as willing to die for their country. Of course, it varies across many different countries, but I think it helped also that this group of people were pretty small relative to today's populations. Okay, so they had a lot of slaves, and they were called helots. And so these slaves did all the manual work in Sparta, right? So if you think about this, you're like, okay, they did all the manual work, so then what does that mean the Spartans are actually doing, right? So Spartans didn't have to work, and they had a ton of leisure time. But since the whole society was structured like a military camp, right, there's a relatively strict set of rules, and that made like people have a very ordered society. Because if you think about it, if you don't have to work, people can very easily just get into a lot of trouble. And if you combine that with like, I think this is also very based off of the fact that you remove the concept of wealth. If you have wealth and like some people are richer than others and some people don't have to work and others do, they're going to like kind of, be very spiteful. You see that like in many countries here, it's like just in the present day, everybody hates the rich people because they're all jealous, right? And so like, it's an interesting concept to remove that comparison and also not have people do work, but like, it's very dangerous because if you don't have people do work, you're just idle, right? Idle hands are the work of the devil. I think that's like kind of a saying. And the point is like they could lead to revolution. They could do a lot of stuff. So actually that's why a lot of times, like it's in the government's benefit to keep people busy so that they don't really have time to, like revolt against the government, do all these different things, okay? But in this case, because everything's so structured and there's a high sense of kind of culture and loyalty, right? So all these idle people just concentrate their efforts on making the youth better or themselves actually learning from older people than them. So it's a constantly like learning and improvement society, which I think is very interesting. Yeah, and the other interesting thing too is that he actually helped remove wealth by the very like root, in the sense that he took the people who would essentially be building, let's say, the nice decorations for like the rich, and he said, no, you're not going to be a craftsman making these things. You're going to be a very basic person. You're going to make stuff that's necessary. You're going to make, like houses, bare bones. You're going to make, like ships and things that are actually useful, not just for decoration and splendor and excess of just luxury. Because I think it does really, if you think about it, in today's modern world, it does get divorced from reality. Like, you're spending so much money on this thing, right? On this watch, on this whatever, but you're pretty much holding up all the value of those dollars when they could be deployed elsewhere for much more like better things for the state, right? So if you think about like if you took that money, you donate to charity, or you use it to build a battleship, like that would be better for the country as a whole. And Lycurgus recognizes this, and that's why he pretty much prevents people from making luxury goods and instead has them just focus on the bare necessities. And so now, even if you have wealth, and again, we said it's very hard to get wealth in that time because like the currency is hard to use, right? All this stuff. And then even if you get wealth, you can't even spend it on anything cool. And the whole society looks down on people who are, flaunting their wealth and stuff. So it just makes a whole society who doesn't really care anymore about being rich, which I thought was very interesting because in today's world, it seems to be exactly the opposite. Yeah, so another aspect that just showed me how everything repeats itself in history is that, today we may think that insider stock trading is bad, right? But back in another life he has is Solon, right? Back in Solon's time, this guy was in charge, right? And he told his friends that he was going to pass a law canceling all debts, right? And he told them ahead of time. And all these friends went to the richest people in the town and asked them to borrow money right before he passed the law. And then he passes the law, and of course the debts are all canceled, and they don't have to pay him back. So it's just like, people think now, oh, the rich are like, or the people in power are always taking advantage of like other people. It's like, that's been happening since, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And that's why I think it's like, it's not great that it still happens, but it just shows like humans are not going to change, right? We may have more technology, but that just like really amplifies our own human nature. It doesn't do anything to actually like improve us, unfortunately. There was also a weird kind of mindset shift that was in this book that was from one of the leaders. It was saying that like, if you have less possessions, you have less to lose. If you have more, your happiness may actually be in danger because you fear losing it. And I think this was a really good point in that like, it's not a solution to stuff because obviously if you don't have enough like to survive on, you're going to of course want more. But I think at a certain point, you reach a turning point in your life where you maybe have more than you need. Or like, okay, we're not going to say more than you need. We're going to say you have much, much more than you need. And now your stress may be on what if I lose it? What if this? What if that? Because you get attached to the enjoyment so much. And so in those cases, it may be better to have at least less material possessions. Like even if you have wealth, at least you have less material possession. Because then it's like, I don't know if you have this experience, you buy something really expensive and then you don't even want to wear it because you're going to ruin it. And that's just like a stress on your mind. So to be truly free, it's like you have to have less possessions. And therefore, because you will have a less fear of losing those things compared to if you were extremely wealthy and worried all the time about it. Of course, there's a lot of caveats to this, but, yeah. So I think he does a really great job. And one of the last things that I wanted to take away was from when he talks about Alexander the Great. He spends quite a bit of time talking about him, but there was this one part where Alexander was taking over a lot of different like countries and towns and all these different like places. And he captures these gymnosophists. So I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I think sophist is like kind of philosopher or something like that, like intellectual. And so he captures them. He says, okay, I'm going to ask you questions. And if any of you guys give a bad answer, I'm going to kill you. Okay. And that's kind of like his thing, right? So he starts asking them questions. And like, I'm going to go through some of the questions and the responses. Of course, right, their responses are not like perfect, but I thought they were very thought-provoking, so I just want to share them with you. So Alexander asks them, are the living or dead more numerous? And then one of them responds, the living because the dead no longer exist. And I think that's interesting because it's like a play on words in the sense of like the dead still exist in our minds, of course, but like physically they don't exist in the world and they don't act to do things and their consciousness is still no longer in the world. Then another question, how can a man win popularity? And they respond by saying, by being extremely powerful without being an object of fear. I think this really echoed a lot of times. People were very concerned about tyranny at that time, right? They're concerned about these overwhelmingly powerful leaders who had just way too much control. And so the idea is be powerful, but don't be an object of fear. Alexander asked them, how can man become a god? And they respond by doing something that a man cannot do, which I thought was an interesting way. Then he asked them, is life or death stronger? And this one, I really like this response. Life, because it carries so much suffering. Which I think is like very opposite of what people today are. Because most people are afraid of death. Like they're like grasping at life, right? Because they don't want to let go and they don't want to die. But in reality, it's life that gives us, happiness and pleasure, but also suffering and torment. And yeah, that's like an interesting take. And the last one, I really, really thought this was eye-opening. How long should a man live? They respond, until he has stopped considering death preferable to life. So, like, this took me a while to process. I was like, what did they mean, right? Until he stopped considering death preferable to life. It's like they're suggesting that you shouldn't live if you feel and enjoy your life so much that you then fear death. You should live in a sense, in a matter where you toil to some sort of extent, or at least you view death as a release. You don't view death as the most scary thing that can happen to you compared to your current. And I think that's actually, maybe it's not correct, but it's a very flipped concept of the modern thinking. Because modern thinking now is like, oh, life is amazing, death is terrible. And I also wonder back then, right? Because you have them going on these conquests, they're getting injured, people are dying all the time, you're having like funerals. So I just feel like growing up in that time, you'd be more exposed to death, and you may be actually more like less detached from it. In our current world, because of modern medicine, which is great, people die much less often. And actually, even with the hospital, we can prolong their life for as like, even if they're not even conscious, we can keep them living in a sense for much, much longer. And I just wonder if as a society that's made us very afraid of this concept of death because of the fact that we're not actually exposed to it much. Because only in those moments when you see others pass, right, do you realize how fleeting life is. And therefore that you actually get empowered to enjoy life more, but also just understand that one day your time will come and there's nothing you can do about it. And accept that as a fact. Instead of living in this delusional reality where you never accept death as a fact or as a reality, and then you just spend your whole life running from it and never actually experience true life. So I think that this classic was really actually pretty eye-opening compared to like what I thought. I'm reading it for one of my classes, so yeah, but I think that there is a lot to be gained from classics because a lot of these truths are very timeless. People think that, just because it was long ago that it doesn't really apply today, but it does apply today. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys later.